Hi, my name is Alyssa, and today I will be talking about the learning style neuromyth. Start off with a little meme. Fun fact, only unicorns have learning styles. Obviously, this is a joke because unicorns don't exist, or do they? But first, let's define exactly what a neuromyth is. A neuromyth is a commonly held misconception about how the brain functions. It's actually in the name, neuro for brain, and myth, a brain myth. So how did this neuromyth become popularized? The idea of learning styles has been around since the 1920s, but it was really popularized in the 80s and early 90s. In the early 90s, a New Zealand man named Neil Fleming watched 9,000 different classes, and he noticed that only some teachers were able to reach each and every one of their students. So he tried to figure out what were they doing differently. So Fleming zeroed in on how some people like to be presented different information. For example, when asking for directions, do you prefer to be told where to go or to have a match sketched for you? So then from this came the VART questionnaire. Today, 16 questions like the ones I just asked, like do you prefer to be told or shown, comprise the VART questionnaire that Fleming developed to determine someone's learning style. VARC stands for visual, oral, or auditory, read/write, and kinesthetic. It sorts students into those who learn best visually, through auditory or heard information, reading, or through kinesthetic experiences. VARC has now become one of the most prominent models out there. So how the myth spread. You've probably seen infographics like these spreading this neuromyth. Experts aren't exactly sure on how the concept spread, but it might have had something to do with the self-esteem movement of the 80s and early 90s. They think this because through the movement they're saying everyone is special in their own way, therefore everyone must have their own special learning method. Teachers were also a big part in spreading this myth as they rushed to change their teaching styles. They doubled down on the idea that students had to take tests to find their supposed learning style. And parents were also encouraged to find out what their child's learning style was. This meant every student now had this idea that they can have and can only learn through one learning style. And teachers felt that they needed to cater their teachings to match these learning styles. In reality, all this did was limit students and didn't really help improve learning. In fact, it actually may have hindered it, but I'll talk about that in a second. Moving on to debunking the myth. There have been many studies debunking this neuromyth, and there haven't really been any concrete studies supporting it. The earliest study I found was from 1999, which if the neuromyth got popularized in the early 1990s, they figured it out pretty quickly. More recently, in a study published in the journal Anatomical Sciences Education in 2018, Polly Hussman, a professor at Indiana University, and her colleagues had hundreds of students take the VART questionnaire to determine what kind of learner they supposedly were. The survey then gave some study strategies that seemed like they would correlate with those learning styles. And Husband found that not only did students not study in ways that seemed to reflect their learning styles, but those who did tailor their learning style to suit their studying, or they did tailor their studying to suit their learning style, didn't actually do any better on tests. Husband thinks that the students had fallen into certain study habits which, once formed, were too hard to break. Students seem to be interested in their learning styles, but not enough to actually change their studying behavior based on them. And even if they had, it wouldn't have mattered. And that's just one of the times the myth was debunked. Similar results have been replicated in other studies, but like I said, there still isn't any concrete evidence to support it. So learning styles in today's society. The learning styles neuromyth is still very prominent in today's society. Teachers play a big role in perpetuating this neuromyth, and their training has a lot to do with it. Teachers are routinely told that in order to be effective educators, they must identify and cater to individual students' learning styles. So it has been estimated that around 90% of students believe that they have a specific neuromyth. Dr. Sandy Decker surveyed 242 teachers. They had expressed interest in learning about the neuroscience and teaching, and found that almost 90% of those teachers also believed in learning styles. So it's a very prominent belief in today's society, even though it's been proven to be false. Confirmation bias has also affected anecdotal evidence. For example, those who strongly believe that matching instructions to learning styles is important are more inclined to notice situations that seem to confirm that, and disregard or downplay instances that are at odds with that. And students are more likely to write off a bad grade or not doing well in a class just because they weren't being taught in their learning style. Misconceptions about learning styles are also fueled by the knowledge that different regions of the brain predominantly process auditory, visual, and kinesthetic information. While that is true, the areas of the brain interconnect with each other, allowing information to transfer between those regions. The brain works as an integrated whole and not closed off compartments. So while people can have preferences with learning styles, it doesn't actually enhance or change their learning in any way. So lastly, why is it so important to learn about this neuromyth? It's important to learn about it because perpetuating it can hinder learning. It limits both teachers and students and can cause things to be taught in a more inefficient way. Learning depends on what is being taught, how much students know about what is being taught, and how motivated they are to learn it. Effective teachers use this information to to focus on differences that actually matter for learning. For example, the content, students' experiences with the content, and their motivation related to learning the content. It's been found that people actually do best when the learning style is based off of what is best for that specific lesson. For example, if it's speaking for a foreign language, they might want to hear more auditory learning, whereas if it's for math, you might want to hear more visual examples rather than listening, because learning styles that are catered to the lesson rather than to the person are actually what's best for learning in an efficient way and a helpful way. So one thing to take away from this is it's okay to have a preference, but don't let your learning style limit you. You can learn using all of them, and actually it's best to learn using all of them. These are my sites. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you learned something new about this neuromyth. That's it. I can't figure out how to stop recording.